ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this 16th day of August, and right now we'll be trying to see if we can join with Queensland Parliament House Fest. Later on, we'll bring to you all the other updates as they come along. So the Premier is joining us live, and yes, we are ready to go. Connecting now.
Today, we have 0 new cases. So that's 0 in the community, 0 in hotel quarantine. So that's wonderful news, and I want to thank Queenslanders for that mighty effort. And of course, we don't know what's going to happen in the future, so we always need to make sure that we're keeping our guard up. And if you are sick, please go and get tested. It's absolutely critical that people do that. We now have 129 active cases. We still have 3,325 people in home quarantine, and I thank everybody for doing that. We've done 9,209 tests in the past 24 hours. Queensland Health did 6,724 vaccines in the past 24 hours. And at the Brisbane Convention and Entertainment Centre on Sunday, 3,080 vaccines were done. So well done, and thank you to all the staff out there and for everyone who came along and got their vaccine. So today, in more good news, Ironside State School will be open, and of course we thank the Commonwealth for getting some of that extra vaccine doses, that Pfizer, so we'll be getting 136,890. And what we want to do there is we want to expand the capacity at Logan and also at Caboolture. So across that southeast, we want to make sure that our vaccination levels are roughly equal across the southeast. We are seeing some lower take-up rates in those communities, and I want to make sure that we get some of the extra vaccine out to those communities. So over the next couple of days, we'll be ramping up the capacity there, and the Health Minister will be able to brief you on that. Now, can I just say to everyone about the border? Can I thank people for their patience? We did see some delays this morning, as we expected. Since 9 o'clock, those delays have come right back down, with the M1 being about an hour and the Gold Coast Highway about 28 minutes. New South Wales is currently in lockdown. There are stay-at-home provisions, so the movement needs to be minimal. And of course, we only have those exemptions for those essential workers. We also know that the positive sewage testing for Delta has been creeping northwards, so we are very concerned. Police and our officials are stopping everyone coming in from the southern states into Queensland through our airports, and they'll be stopping people coming in through the roads. These strict border measures are necessary, and they will be enforced. So if you do not need to travel, do not travel. So we expect that the crossings of those borders should lessen over the coming days, especially with New South Wales being in that now complete lockdown. Now, Dr Young will outline a new policy today that it will only be that those few who are exempt, so that means those essential workers, they will be required from Friday to have at least 1 dose of their vaccination. So Dr Young will talk about that, but we are extremely concerned about the possibility of this virus coming into Queensland. So we will take every precaution we possibly can. We've heard reports today that the Victorian lockdown could be extended, and we know that the New South Wales lockdown will be several months. So to keep Queenslanders safe, I would appreciate that every Queenslander would understand that these measures are needed. They are strict. We will be enforcing them, and we apologise for the inconvenience. We will still the health ministers are still in discussion about that Tweed River issue, but we have not heard anything back. So we have tried to accommodate the people living in that Tweed region, but I appreciate they are part of New South Wales, and it is entirely the discretion of the New South Wales government to include them in the New South Wales lockdown. So we have tried our hardest, but unfortunately this is the situation we're in. It is going to cause some inconvenience, but this is what is necessary to make sure that we continue to keep Queensland as safe as possible. We don't know where the next outbreak is going to come from. We don't know where the next outbreak from hotel quarantine is going to be, or someone who comes across our border and brings it here. So we need to keep doing everything that we're doing, and I thank Queenslanders for that. Can I also just make a couple of comments about some other matters? Can I, first of all, extend our thoughts to Totai Kefu and his family. That absolutely tragic home invasion that happened last night. Our thoughts and prayers are with him and his family. I don't think anybody would want that to happen to their home and to their loved ones. And the Police Commissioner has briefed me personally on that this morning, and our hearts go out to them, as I know all Queenslanders would. No one would expect a home invasion of that violence and nature to happen in their homes. Secondly, the bus crash yesterday. Can we also express our thoughts with the families of those injured in the head-on bus crash? 35 emergency workers were on the scene. I thank every one of them for their extraordinary work in dealing with the situation, but also in terms of airlifting people to hospital. 22 people were on the minibus. They were taken to hospital. 2 are in a critical condition. We had 2 rescue helicopters, 7 paramedics, more than 20 police and 11 firefighters. So that gives you a sort of understanding of the scale of that. So this week is Queensland Road Safety Week, and can I urge Queenslanders to please take care out on the roads. We don't want to see any more situations like that unfold. I'll hand over to Dr Young, and the Deputy Premier will be addressing the quarantine issue.
Thank you, Premier. So,
Live
good
coverage
morning.
from Queensland
Excellent
Parliament.
news for the South East this morning. No new cases, and it's now 10 days since we had a case infectious in the community, which is very, very reassuring. But please, for the next week, till Sunday 4 p.m, could people keep on wearing their masks? Because we know that if there was a missed case out there who was, say, asymptomatic, they could have passed it on. So we just have to be a little bit cautious for that remaining 7 days with our restrictions. Now, the significant issue that we now are facing in Queensland is we can see, and we saw this right at the start, you would remember 18 months ago there was that modelling and those predictions that once there was a significant outbreak that was not under control in another state, it would steadily move out into the rest of the nation. And that's what we're seeing out of Sydney. So we saw initially it was managed and contained to Sydney, then to Greater Sydney, and now it's escaped Greater Sydney and it's out in the regions, and it's steadily coming further and further out. We've seen positive sewage as far west as Broken Hill. We've seen it go up to Ballina, Byron Bay, Lennox Heads. So we know that it will continue to creep towards our border. So it is really, really important that anyone who normally crosses the border to go into New South Wales or comes from New South Wales into Queensland really thinks hard. And I'll be speaking to the Director Generals of all the government agencies after this briefing here to talk to them about it. That they should only be crossing the border if it is absolutely essential, and services either side of the border would fall over if those people didn't cross the border. And then to put in another protection, I know it's not quite there yet because we don't have enough of our own Queenslanders vaccinated yet, but if that person absolutely has to cross the border, that services would collapse without that support, and this is Queenslanders going into the border zone in New South Wales or people in the border zone coming into Queensland, then as another protection, I'm asking that at the latest by Friday, and I hope most of them are already vaccinated, the latest by Friday they must have had at least 1 dose of vaccine, and then 3 weeks later for Pfizer, 8 weeks later for AstraZeneca have their second dose. Now, most of these people would already have been vaccinated because we've been vaccinating healthcare workers, police, emergency services since February. So I suspect there won't be many, but just in case there are, I've put that deadline in by Friday that they must be vaccinated. Otherwise they cannot, although they're even essential, they can't cross the border. That's really important. Then the other thing we've been doing is we've been pushing more doses of vaccine to all of those communities along our border. So from Gold Coast extending all the way across to the South Australian border, along that border zone, some of those communities have already done a brilliant work. So some of them are at 52% of people have had at least one dose, but I want, as close to 100% of people having had at least one dose of the vaccine in that 16-year-old plus age group. So we're targeting 70%, but of course I want everyone to have that opportunity, because the most important thing you can do for yourself, for your own health, is to be vaccinated. We've seen a few deaths in New South Wales, but only of very, very frail elderly people who've had 2 doses of vaccine. Younger people who've been vaccinated have not been dying from COVID. So vaccine is really important for the individual, and then it's important because we also believe that it's less likely, not impossible, but less likely that you'll spread the virus if you've been vaccinated. We did see that reef pilot, of course, in Cairns, who was fully vaccinated, spread it to one other person, but not to other people. So we're unlikely to see one of those super spreader events. Again, not impossible. Nothing's impossible, but it's less likely. So that's why I'm asking that anyone who really needs to cross that border, that they're vaccinated, preferably fully, but at least the first dose. That's very important. Thank you.
Well, I'm very pleased to report that the Premier has now signed a Memorandum of Understanding with the Australian Government to allow them to proceed with the construction of their proposed Australian Government quarantine facility at Pinkenba. I want to thank officials of Queensland Government agencies and the Australian Government for working so closely together. They really have worked around the clock to get to this point and were informed by a very detailed feasibility study by consultants ACOM. This will allow for a 1,000-bed quarantine facility to be constructed by the Commonwealth at that defence site at Pinkenba, Damascus Barracks. And with this agreement now in place and the understanding that once constructed, the Queensland Government will operate the facility, the Australian Government can now get on with the job of building it. We need it as soon as possible. It's never been more urgent to have facilities like this one. At this stage, we anticipate it being ready by around the middle of next year, and we continue to urge the Commonwealth to work with us on additional quarantine facilities, including in regional areas that might be able to take pressure off our hotel quarantine system.
Well, Queensland is now the only state on the mainland east coast of Australia that is open. For us to keep it this way, we need to do everything possible to keep the virus out, and we need to do everything possible to prepare for the next outbreak. So getting tested, any symptoms whatsoever, please come forward and isolate until you get your results. And of course vaccinations, and big shout out to every health worker, everyone who's working in the Queensland Health Vaccination Centres, including the Brisbane Convention and Exhibition Centre that did over 6,000 over the weekend, and of course to all of our GPs and our community pharmacies as well, who are all working together to get Queenslanders vaccinated. Last week we were able to do over 92,423 vaccines for the week, and we welcomed the announcement yesterday of extra vaccines coming into Queensland. We believe that extra vaccine that the Prime Minister announced of Pfizer will arrive later this week, and what we will do is look at prioritising those additional vaccines to the outer ring of Brisbane. So we've seen some of our lower take-up rates in those areas, such as Caboolture and Logan. We want to make sure that we're getting vaccines out there and we're encouraging people to come forward. Of course, anyone who is 60 plus, we're encouraging you to book with a GP or community pharmacy and get your vaccine. If you're due for your second AstraZeneca, please get in and get that second vaccination done as well. If we keep doing this, if we keep getting tested and we get vaccinated as quickly as possible, we can ensure that we can work together and keep the community safe And as the Chief Health Officer and the Premier has said, we will be requiring people who are essential workers who are being allowed to travel across that border zone to be vaccinated from Friday. So to do that, we will be putting in place measures at our vaccination centres down on the border on the Gold Coast to ensure that those who have an exemption can turn up and show that they are one of those exempt essential workers and be able to be prioritised for a vaccine. We want to support them in getting vaccinated as quickly as possible, but we do need them to do this because we need to keep ramping up our measures to make us as safe as possible due to the escalating risks we are now seeing coming out of New South Wales and, of course, now ACT and Victoria.
If I could start with our road borders, in the last 24 hours till 5 a.m. this morning, we intercepted 6,442 vehicles and we turned around 606 vehicles, which is a significant increase in the numbers of vehicles that we've had to turn around. What was pleasing, we didn't have to take any enforcement action against anyone, so that is a good thing.
Leave that news conference right there and we'll go into some of the other news. As we know that last night police were investigating this incident, and this incident is around a scene where a stabbing happened during a break-in at Cooperative on Brisbane South. 4 people have been taken to hospital after sustaining knife wounds during a break-in at Cooperative in Brisbane South. So, and those are the scenes coming from there. And as the Premier had mentioned in her speech about that bus crash, yes, the emergency services at the scene after a car and the bus collided. So as you can see, emergency services have treated 24 people after a bus collided with a car on a highway near Logan, which is also on the south of Brisbane. Now that's Brisbane covered. Let's go now to New South Wales. 415 cases overnight.
Good morning, everybody. In New South Wales, we had 127,000 tests to 8 p.m. last night, which is always a pleasing result, and we're so grateful people are coming forward to do the right thing. We had 415 cases of community transmission, so a welcome drop from yesterday, but obviously much more work to be done. We just ask everybody to please stick to the rules, stay home, get tested if you have symptoms, stay home again until you get the results, and of course come forward and get vaccinated. Of those 415 cases of community transmission, at least 35 are infectious in the community, and that number is likely to go up as cases under investigation are consolidated. Regrettably, 4 people lost their lives to 8 p.m. last night. A female in her 50s from Western Sydney at Campbelltown Hospital who wasn't vaccinated. A female in her 70s at Royal North Shore Hospital who was only recently given her first dose, so wasn't protected. A man in his 80s at Liverpool Hospital who wasn't vaccinated. A female in her 80s at RPA who was vaccinated but did have underlying chronic conditions. Again, our heartfelt, deepest sympathies and condolences to all of their loved ones. Please know the last thing we want to see is more deaths because of this outbreak.
It's become a white elephant if it's not completed until around the middle of next year?
Well, we've made we've signed the documentation, so it's now over to the federal government. They said that they would build it, and once they have completed it, we will operate it.
And did you seek to make any changes to that MOU at all?
I tasked the Deputy Premier with that, so I think it was quite well negotiated between the 2 agencies.
Will the victim last night actually take any pressure on hotel quarantine?
Yes, we hope it does, absolutely. But we also maintain that we think that an additional regional facility would also be of great assistance as well.
So would be used to increase touch of people coming in and out to take people out of hotel quarantine, or have people coming in?
If we have 2 facilities, then we would not have to use hotel quarantine.
The dresses with the ones we have
Should be reducing the pressure, yes.
In terms of the New South Wales Premier getting back to you about moving the Tweed border, is time running out for that to happen? Because I assume you're saying that the serious...
I tasked that to the Health Minister. So the Health Minister was in talks with her counterpart down in New South Wales, Brad Hazzard, and we get to hear back. Look, I understand they are extremely busy down there. You know, I don't for one moment think how busy they are dealing with the current outbreak. And as I said yesterday, and I'll say it again, we hope that they get on top of this for the sake of the people in New South Wales and for the sake of the nation, because you've got the largest economy shut down.
If you start seeing sewage results for COVID in the Tweed area, does that option go out the door?
I'd say so, yes.
Premier, when Queensland...
The Queensland Premier at the question time with the press conference there. We'll leave that, and if we need to, we can join that later on as well. Right now, let's hear from our Prime Minister.
I have a simple plea to the people right across New South Wales, and I know particularly in rural areas where people are wondering, well, there haven't been any cases in our area, so why do they have to lock down in rural and regional New South Wales? Where we're seeing that already, where the virus has been able to spread, particularly to some of our most sensitive communities, Indigenous Australian communities, places like Walgett and so on. And we have to prevent that. We have to try and prevent that as much as possible. And so my plea to my fellow Australians, particularly my fellow Sydney-siders, stay at home. Stay at home. Only leave when you absolutely have to. There's no need to be out for hours and hours and hours a day. I know the rules provide it, but please don't do it. Stay home. The more we do that, the more likely we're going to get through this. We've been seeing those case numbers rise in Sydney, in New South Wales each day, and that is terribly concerning. So together, we've got to get those numbers coming down. And there are two things we can do. I need you to stay at home, and you needed more vaccines from us. More vaccines are on their way. They'll be there this week, and so I need Sydney-siders to stay home so we can beat this thing. That's the only way we're going to get on top of it. Those two things combined, working together, suppress and vaccinate.
So Prime Minister's promise that the vaccines are coming in, and his plea is that we stay at home. Of course, that's easier said than done, and many times people do need to get out and about. And I didn't want to say this, and that's why I've never been saying that we are so lucky here in Queensland. But, you know, no one knows something happens around the corner. Right now, let's go to Victoria, as I'd like to bring to you some glimpses of last night's mega gala dinner at Queensland Parliament House, organised by GOPIO Queensland on the occasion of the 75th Independence Day of India.
There are far too many cases, firstly. Then there are many cases that are not linked. Now, they invariably become linked over time because we do all that coronavirus detective work and we interview and re-interview and we sort of find those missing pieces. But there are a number of mystery cases, and those numbers continue to grow, and that's really challenging. If we were to reopen the whole economy, if we were to reopen and let people move freely right now, then we would finish up where Sydney's at. Thousands of cases, not cases in the 10s and 20s, but thousands of cases, and hundreds of people in hospital, and many of them, you know, very, very unwell. We would finish up with deaths. If there was another way, then we would choose that alternative. There isn't. We have to continue to be vigilant. And I know this is getting really hard. It's getting really frustrating. It's getting really difficult. But I just say to people, look, a sneaky and illegal visit to regional Victoria, it's just not worth it. It's not worth potentially spreading this virus. A pub crawl, an impromptu or pre-planned. Victoria Police are having a close look at that, and I'll let them update you later on today. But a pub crawl, and that's what it was in Richmond last night, is not worth it. It's just not worth it. None of us should be doing anything that potentially spreads this virus, because this virus is not something anyone wants to get. We're not talking about people in their 90s, that's tragic enough, but we're talking about people dying in their 30s and 40s and 50s. This will go where the vaccine isn't. This will mean more and more people are in intensive care. For yourself, for your family, for people you know, for people you'll never meet, for our health professionals who'll have to care for people because of your selfish decisions. Please, I appeal to every Victorian. Please do what the vast majority are doing. Following the rules.
Yes, his plea is that everyone do the right thing and stick by those rules, because the situation is quite dire. We saw, and I didn't bring that news, but you know, someone went to a engagement party and they posted on Facebook, and that video got picked up, and now the police are there and an investigation, and that it was an illegal gathering and none of the safety precautions were taken into account. So these kind of things keep happening, and he's talking about that pub brawl. People still do those kind of things. So how irresponsible. And of course we know there have been functions and events happening here in Brisbane. Those have been allowed and all done under the COVID regulations. But of course it is on us to do the right thing. It is very, very important that we do that and maintain that vigilance that you count. Well, right now let's go to ICT.
Well, look, since our last update yesterday, we have 2 new confirmed cases. This brings the total number to 9. The first case is a man in his 20s. And unfortunately at this point there are no obvious links to other cases. So an investigation is underway to determine how this man became infected. The other case is linked back to the Fiction nightclub site. So this is also concerning. So it's essential that anyone who was at the Fiction nightclub at the exposure times gets tested and remains isolated. There are a number of new exposure sites across the territory. Those have been updated on the ACT COVID-19 website, and Dr. Colin will provide some further information shortly. On the good news front, yesterday 5,943 tests were conducted across the ACT. So this is an all...
So there you go, the new cases coming up. Of course, the testing is taking place and more people are coming forward to get tested. But the concern still is the growing numbers. And you could see or pick it up from his voice as he mentioned the numbers, the uneasiness in there. So the numbers need to be controlled, need to be maintained, they need to be plateaued out. And it can only be done with the community's help, and everyone does the right thing there as well. Well, of course, many times some decisions that are made, and if they are not made properly and not with proper consultation, there is always a backfire, as was the case in Broken Hill. Well, of course, as regional New South Wales comes under the threat, some areas were, declared as hot zones, but the proper consultation did not take place, and that is a bit of a concern, as is the case in Broken Hill, and the Mayor speaks with these.
Daria, how did you find out about this lockdown yesterday, and how did the message get out to the community? Because it happened all very quickly and was announced on social media and not through a press conference.
Look, I'm shocked. Luckily for me, my state member sent me a text message. I was in an emergency management committee meeting, and he sent me a text message that it was going to be announced. That's all I've had. I don't think we've got an email about it. I can't understand why the government made the decision to tweet it. I know that the South Australian Premier, when he had second news over time, he's come back and had another press conference where people could ask questions, when, the community listening to the news could explore what were the answers for the decision. Look, I'm shocked. Luckily for me, my state member sent me a text message. I was in an emergency management committee meeting, and he sent me a text message that it was going to be announced. That's all I've had. I don't think we've got an email.
So there you go. If proper consultations do not take place, then there is always problems there as well. Well, right now, as promised, that we will go and have a look, and a very quick look at GOPIO Queensland's function last night. So this took place at the Queensland Parliament House yesterday, and of course, as you can see from the settings and from the interiors, it was very, very well done. And all the set out was just amazing, and an amazing turnout there as well. And guests have started arriving in, and of course it was good to see that a lot of people and the guests in fact arrived early, which is quite unlike what we normally see in our community. So it was good to see that people coming in on time and before time so that the program could begin straight away. And the registration desk there as well, and of course Councillor Vicky Howard and Councillor Landis are coming as well.
You're on table 1.
More time to prepare now, so I'm sure it's going to be bigger and better on 23rd of October. So please mark your diaries. 23rd of October it is. As the tradition goes, GOPIO has always held a function, a celebratory function on the 15th of August. And to continue the tradition, Umeshji and the whole team, we couldn't sit back. We had to, meet everyone and wish happy Independence Day, give our wishes and, have a celebratory event. And that's why we're having this event on a very short notice, so apologies for that. So thank you so much to each and everyone to come and grace this evening.
May I begin by first acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which we gather tonight and pay our respect to elders past, present and emerging. May I now call upon Mrs. Archana Singh, Honorary Council for India and Queensland, Christine Castley, CEO of Multicultural Australia, Peter Russo, MP, Vinita Kaushal, immediate past President, GOPIO Queensland, John Paul Lambrook, is he here yet? He will be running late, MP, Margaret Grummet, Honorary Council of the Philippines, to come to the stage to light the lamp. Thank you.
Lighting up the lamp to begin the proceedings for the
Thank you. Somebody left
Right now we'll go to one of the performances for the
जो वतन पे मिट जाते हैं, अमर वो शहीद हैं जो वतन पे मिट जाते हैं, खुश नसीब हैं वो जो वतन को महफूज रखते हैं। आवाम की आज़ादी का इस्तकबाल जो करते हैं, आवाम की आज़ादी का इस्तकबाल जो करते हैं, सलाम तुझे देश के जवान, सलाम तुझे देश के जवान, कुर्बानी का जज्बा जो हर हाल में रखते हैं, कुर्बानी का जज्बा जो हर हाल में रखते हैं। जय हिंद, जय भारत।
सुनहरी अंबर नीला हो, धरती सुनहरी अंबर नीला, हर मौसम रंगीला, ऐसा देश मेरा हो, ऐसा देश मेरा, ऐसा देश मेरा हो, ऐसा देश मेरा। बोले पपीहा कोयल गाए, बोले पपीहा कोयल गाए, सावन गिर के आए, ऐसा देश मेरा, ऐसा देश मेरा हो, ऐसा देश मेरा हो, ऐसा देश मेरा।
So, ladies and gentlemen, there you are. Some glimpses from the event last night, and it was a wonderful event. And all the feedback and the comments that we have received as great. And I'd like to thank the staff of the Parliament House. They were just amazing. The menu was amazing as well, because many times the vegetarian selection at venues like this can be challenging. But last night's one was just amazing and such a good feedback on that. And I would also like to place on record our sincere apologies to many people who missed out because of the COVID restrictions and the restricted number of people that could be accommodated in that speaker's hall. So that was the big challenge. We received numerous requests for people, but we really felt very bad saying no to people because that is so unlike us. It's unlike GOPIO, but it's not us. It's the venue where only that many people can be accommodated. And look, the function did take place in the Queensland Parliament House. And these rules and regulations are set by Queensland government. So, the first rule makers can't be the rule breakers as well. So we had to abide by those rules and have the numbers kept at what was given to us. Well, ladies and gentlemen, it has been wonderful having your company once again. And we'll see you once again tomorrow with any further updates on those restrictions. We'll keep an eye on what's happening in New South Wales, which is quite alarming, 415 cases. And of course, Victoria isn't looking better either. And of course, right now we have seen it creep into ICT as well. And as our Prime Minister mentioned, that unless it's absolutely necessary, do not travel. Just stay put. If you can safely just go to your work and be in a locked environment or something without interaction directly with the general public. Of course, you can connect electronically, via Zoom and whatever, and do your work in the office which is not open to public, then it's okay, things like that. So you need to adapt to the conditions and act accordingly. So ladies and gentlemen, once again, it's been wonderful having your company, and once again I'd like to thank everyone who attended last night, and my apologies to everyone who could not, who wanted to attend but could not because it got sold out in less than 22 hours. Once again, goodbye from now. We'll see you once again tomorrow at 10 a.m.